Here you go, dear. Eat up, it's still hot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can I have some too?
A street food vendor fed homeless triplets every day. Years later, 3 Lamborghini pulled up to her food stand. Listen to me. There's a moment in life when everything you built crumbles to dust. When the people you love turn their backs on you. When the world decides you're worth nothing. That's where our story begins. But it doesn't end there. What you're about to hear will break your heart. It will make you angry. It will make you question everything about human nature. But by the end of this, you'll understand what it means to be truly strong. It will make you question everything about human nature. But by the end of this, you'll understand what it means to be truly strong. Years ago, a black woman stood on the side of a street selling food from a makeshift stand in an urban neighborhood. She had nothing. No home, no family, no hope. But she had a choice. And that choice would change everything. 3 luxury Lamborghini vehicles pulled up to her food stand one Friday afternoon. A white one that gleamed like fresh snow, a red one that blazed like fire, a lime green one that stood out like emerald lightning. The neighborhood went silent. Traffic stopped. People pulled out their phones. Everyone watched, but nobody knew the truth about what was happening. From the white Lamborghini stepped a stunning black woman in an elegant red evening gown, her natural hairstyle to perfection. From the red Lamborghini emerged a sharp black man in a black suit with burgundy accents, his presence commanding respect. From the lime green Lamborghini came another sophisticated black man in a blue suit, his quiet confidence unmistakable. And there, standing behind her humble food stand with bowls of soul food steaming in the afternoon sun, was an older black woman in a bright yellow floral dress. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide with shock. The spatula she'd been holding clattered to the ground. She looked like she'd seen ghosts, or angels, or something impossible made real. Today I'm going to tell you everything. The pain, the betrayal, the transformation. Stay with me because this story will change how you see kindness forever. But before we dive in, I need you to do 3 things for me right now. First, subscribe to Virtuous Stories and turn on that notification bell, because once you hear this story, you'll want to see every single one we have waiting for you. Second, give this video a like. It takes 1 second and it means the world. Third, comment your country down below before we continue. Let me know where you're watching from. I want to know who's hearing this story with me. Okay, let's begin. Her name was Hannah Mitchell. She was 53 years old when those Lamborghini arrived. But to understand that moment, to understand why tears were streaming down her face as 3 elegantly dressed strangers walked toward her with their arms open wide, we have to go back. Back to when she had everything, and back to when she lost it all. When our story really starts, Hannah Mitchell was a woman with a husband who loved her, a marriage that felt solid, and a life that seemed like it was heading somewhere good. She wasn't rich. Nobody would call her wealthy, but she had enough. She and Marcus, her husband, lived in a modest home in a working-class black neighborhood where brownstones lined the streets and neighbors knew each other's names. She had food on the table, she had stability, and most importantly, she had hope. She would wake up in the mornings next to her husband, Marcus Mitchell, and they would talk about the future. They would dream together. They would make plans, real plans. Plans that included children, plans that included a family, plans that included growing old together in that little house with Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings filled with laughter. They would talk about names. Marcus liked traditional names. Hannah wanted something unique. They would laugh about it over coffee, imagining a little boy running through the house or a little girl with Hannah's eyes and Marcus's smile. Marcus was a good man, not perfect, but good. He worked hard at the warehouse, pulling long shifts to make sure they had what they needed. He came home to her every night, tired but present. He held her hand when they watched TV. He kissed her forehead before falling asleep. He told her she was beautiful, even on the days when she didn't feel beautiful, when her hair wasn't done, and she was wearing old sweats around the house. They had been married for 5 years, and it felt like they were finally ready to take the next step, finally ready to become parents, finally ready to start the family they had always wanted. But life has a way of interrupting our plans, doesn't it? Life has a way of throwing things at us that we never saw coming. The problem wasn't with Marcus. The problem wasn't with Hannah. The problem was that Hannah couldn't get pregnant. Year after year, they tried. Month after month, their hope would rise, and then it would crash again and again and again. Hannah would track her cycle religiously, marking the calendar with little symbols that meant something only to her. She would take her temperature every morning. She would watch for signs, any signs. And every month, when she saw blood, a piece of her died inside. With each crash, a piece of Hannah's confidence crumbled away. She started to believe that maybe something was wrong with her. Maybe she wasn't meant to be a mother. Maybe she would never hold her own child in her arms. These thoughts consumed her. They kept her awake at night while Marcus slept peacefully beside her. They made her feel empty in a way that nothing could fill, like there was a hollow space inside her chest where something vital should have been. She tried everything. She read books about fertility. She changed her diet, cutting out caffeine and alcohol, eating foods that were supposed to help. She prayed. God, how she prayed. She would kneel by the bed at night and beg God to give her a child, to make her body work the way it was supposed to work, to make her complete. But month after month, her prayers seemed to bounce off the ceiling and fall back down on her head. Hannah went to doctors, 3 different ones. They ran tests. They poked and prodded and took blood samples. They gave her pamphlets and talked to her in soft voices about options. But the tests came back inconclusive. Nothing was definitively wrong, but nothing was right either. Her body was a mystery that no one could solve, a puzzle with missing pieces that couldn't be found. The visits to the doctor's office became a special kind of torture. She would sit in waiting rooms surrounded by pregnant women, their bellies round and full, their faces glowing with that particular joy that Hannah craved with every fiber of her being. She would watch them rub their bellies absently, and she would feel rage and jealousy and shame all mixed together in a toxic cocktail that burned in her throat. As a Black woman, Hannah carried additional weight with these struggles. She heard the whispers in her community, the assumptions about Black women's bodies being made for motherhood, the expectations that were somehow both biological destiny and moral obligation. She felt the judgment from older church ladies who asked pointed questions about when she'd give Marcus babies. She felt the pressure from a culture that told her Black motherhood was resistance, was legacy, was everything. And here she was, failing at the one thing her body should naturally do. Marcus tried to be supportive. He really did. He would hold Hannah when she cried, which was often. He would tell her that it didn't matter to him, that they could adopt, that there were other ways to build a family. He would stroke her hair and whisper that he loved her, that she was enough, that she didn't need to give him children to be valuable. But Hannah could see something in his eyes. Or maybe she imagined it. When you're drowning in shame and pain, it's hard to see things clearly. It's hard to trust what people tell you. It's hard to believe that you're enough, just as you are. She would catch him looking at children in the park with an expression she couldn't quite read. Longing, sadness, disappointment. She didn't know and she was too afraid to ask. She saw how his face lit up when his co-workers talked about their kids, how he laughed at their stories about first steps and lost teeth. And every time Hannah felt like she was failing him, like she was stealing something from him that he deserved, like she was broken goods that he was too kind to return. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was Marcus's mother, Gloria Mitchell. Gloria was the kind of woman who had opinions about everything, and she wasn't shy about sharing them. She had raised Marcus as a single mother after his father died, and she had done it with an iron will and high expectations. She loved her son fiercely, possessively, and in Gloria's mind, no woman would ever be quite good enough for him. But Hannah had won her. Over at first, or so she thought. Gloria had approved of their marriage, had welcomed Hannah into the family with Sunday dinners and advice about how to take care of her son. That all changed when the grandchildren didn't come. Gloria had always wanted grandchildren, always. She talked about it constantly, dropping hints and making pointed comments. She would show Hannah pictures of her friends' grandchildren, cooing over them, and then looking at Hannah with expectation heavy in her eyes. She would ask, not so subtly, when Hannah and Marcus were planning to start a family. And when month after month passed with no pregnancy, Gloria's patience wore thinner and thinner. The comments started small, little jabs disguised as concern. "Are you eating right, Hannah? You know, nutrition is so important for fertility." Or, "Maybe you should see a specialist." There are treatments these days. But as time went on and Hannah's belly stayed flat, the comments grew sharper, meaner, more direct. And then came the comments laced with colorism and classism, the kind that cut even deeper because they attacked not just Hannah's fertility, but her worth as a black woman. Maybe if you were better, took better care of yourself. The implication was clear. Gloria, with her light skin and middle-class aspirations, had always thought Marcus could do better, could marry lighter, could marry richer, could marry someone more worthy of the Mitchell name. Gloria would visit their home and make comments, cruel comments that cut like knives. She would look Hannah up and down and say things like, "Maybe you're just not woman enough to carry a child." She would sigh dramatically and say, Marcus could have married someone fertile, someone who could actually give him what he needs." She would shake her head sadly and add, "I didn't raise my son to have a barren wife." Barren. That word became Hannah's nightmare. It followed her everywhere. Barren. Like she was dry earth that nothing could grow in. Like she was useless, purposeless, empty. Gloria said it with such casual cruelty, as if she were commenting on the weather and not destroying a woman's sense of self-worth one syllable at a time. The comments got worse at family gatherings. Gloria would make sure everyone heard. At Thanksgiving, she would talk loudly about how she hoped to have grandchildren before she died, looking directly at Hannah. At Christmas, she would give Marcus's cousins expensive gifts for their children and then turn to Hannah with pitying eyes. "I suppose I'll have to wait a while longer for someone to buy for in this family," she would say, her voice dripping with judgment. Hannah tried to ignore her. She tried to tell herself that Gloria's words didn't matter, that the older woman was just disappointed in taking it out on the wrong person. But words have power, don't they? Words stick with us. Words burrow deep into our souls, and they take root there, and they grow into something dark and twisted. You can't just unhear them. You can't just brush them off. They accumulate, layer upon layer, until they become the voice in your own head. 2 years of this, 2 years of Gloria's cruel whispers and pointed looks and dramatic sighs. 2 years of watching Marcus try to mediate between his mother and his wife, always choosing to keep the peace rather than defend Hannah the way she needed to be defended. 2 years of monthly disappointments and negative pregnancy tests, and Gloria's voice echoing in her ears. Every morning, Hannah would look in the mirror and see a failure. She would see a woman who couldn't do the one thing women were supposed to be able to do naturally. She would see someone unworthy of love, unworthy of her husband, unworthy of space in the world. Every time she felt a cramp or saw blood, her heart would break all over again. And every time Gloria visited, which was often, Hannah would feel the shame wash over her like acid, burning her from the inside out. The worst moments were the quiet ones, late at night when she couldn't sleep, lying in the dark next to Marcus, feeling like an imposter in her own marriage. Who was she if she couldn't be a mother? What was her purpose? What was her value? The questions circled in her mind like vultures, picking at what was left of her self-esteem. She stopped going to baby showers. She couldn't bear it anymore. The games about baby names and the gifts wrapped in pastel paper, and the way everyone would look at her with pity or curiosity, wondering why she wasn't pregnant yet, wondering what was wrong with her. She would make excuses, claim she was sick or busy or needed to work. Her friends stopped inviting her after a while, and that hurt too, being excluded, but it was easier than attending. She stopped talking about children with Marcus. The conversations had become too painful, too loaded with everything they weren't saying. They would talk about work, about bills, about what to watch on TV, about anything except the gaping hole in their lives where children should have been. Hannah threw herself into work. She worked part-time as a cook at a local diner, and it was the only place she felt competent anymore. In the kitchen, she knew what she was doing. She could create something with her hands, feed people, receive gratitude and compliments. It was the only place where she felt like she had value, like she was good at something, like she mattered. The regulars loved her cooking. They would ask for her specifically, would compliment her seasoning, would tell her she had a gift. It was the only place where Hannah felt like she wasn't failing. But even that couldn't fill the emptiness inside her. Even that couldn't silence Gloria's voice in her head, telling her she wasn't enough. Even that couldn't erase the look in Marcus's eyes when he saw children. The look that said he wanted something she couldn't give him. The treatments they tried were expensive, far beyond what they could afford on Marcus's warehouse salary and Hannah's part-time wages. They scraped together money for one round of fertility treatment, sacrificing date nights and new clothes and anything that wasn't essential. Hannah injected herself with hormones that made her emotional and nauseous. She endured more tests, more procedures, more hope. And when it failed, when she got her period right on schedule despite everything, the despair was crushing. They couldn't afford to try again. That door was closed. Hannah prayed desperately. She made deals with God. She promised to be a better person, a better wife, a better Christian if he would just give her this one thing. She went to church every Sunday and listened to sermons about God's perfect timing and his plans for her life. And she wondered why his plan for her included this particular brand of suffering. She watched other women in the congregation get pregnant seemingly without effort, watched them grow round and glowing, watched them bring their babies to church and receive congratulations. And she felt her faith cracking under the weight of unanswered prayers. The isolation was complete. Friends who were getting pregnant stopped calling as much. They didn't know what to say to Hannah anymore. Their lives were filled with nursery shopping and birthing classes and complaints about morning sickness, and Hannah couldn't relate. She couldn't participate. She was locked outside of the sisterhood of motherhood, watching through a window she couldn't break. Hannah was drowning, slowly, quietly, drowning in shame, in inadequacy, in the crushing weight of expectations she couldn't meet. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She laughed when she was supposed to laugh. She went to church on Sundays and nodded when the pastor talked about God's plans and perfect timing. But inside, she was dying. Inside, she believed every cruel word Gloria had ever said to her. Inside, she had started to believe that maybe she really was worthless. And that's where Hannah was when everything changed. That's the woman she was before life decided to break her completely, before she lost everything she thought mattered, before she discovered what she was actually made of. She was already broken, already convinced of her own inadequacy, already carrying shame so heavy it nearly crushed her. She just didn't know how much worse it could get. That's when Marcus came home one evening with a proposal. Not a marriage proposal, they were already married, but a proposal nonetheless, a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman who didn't even know she was waiting for rescue. His company was sending him on a work trip to a coastal city for a week-long conference. Business meetings during the day, but the evenings would be free. The company was paying for the hotel. He wanted Hannah to come with him. He wanted them to get away from everything. Away from Gloria. Away from the doctors and the tests and the negative pregnancy results. Away from the weight of their expectations and the suffocating pressure of trying and failing and trying again. Just the two of them for 1 week in a place where nobody knew them. Nobody knew their story. Nobody would judge them or ask questions or make comments about when they were going to have children. Nobody would look at Hannah like she was broken. Hannah was hesitant at first. Part of her didn't want to leave. Part of her was afraid. "What if something happens?" she asked Marcus, her voice small with worry. "What if Gloria comes by and I'm not there? What if she thinks I'm being selfish? What if people at church notice we're gone?" But Marcus insisted. He held her face in his hands one night, his thumbs gentle on her cheeks, and he looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Baby, I love you," he said, his voice firm but tender. "Not because you've given me children, not because you've done anything for me. I love you because you're you. Let me show you that. Let me remind you that you matter, that we matter, that this marriage is about more than what we don't have." And something in Hannah broke open. Something that had been locked tight for 2 years, sealed shut with shame and disappointment and the crushing weight of failure, suddenly cracked open. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she let herself believe him. She let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to who they used to be before infertility became the center of their entire existence. They packed their bags that weekend. Hannah chose her favorite yellow sundress, the one Marcus always said made her glow. She packed comfortable shoes for walking and a swimsuit she hadn't worn in years. She felt a flutter of something in her chest that might have been excitement, Might have been hope. Might have been the first breath after being underwater too long. The drive to the coast took 8 hours. Marcus drove while Hannah sat in the passenger seat watching the landscape change from familiar urban neighborhoods to suburbs to rolling hills to coastal cliffs. With every mile that stretched between them and home, she felt something shift inside her. The weight that she had been carrying, the invisible burden that had been pressing down on her shoulders for 2 years, seemed to get lighter. Not gone, but lighter. Manageable. Like maybe she could breathe again. They listened to old R&B, the music from when they were dating, when everything was new and possible. Songs by Luther Vandross and Anita Baker, melodies that reminded them of who they were before the pain started. Marcus sang off-key to the choruses, making Hannah laugh for the first time in what felt like months. Real laughter, the kind that comes from your belly and makes your face hurt. They held hands across the center console, fingers intertwined like teenagers. They talked about nothing important and everything important. They talked about dreams that didn't include children, dreams they had forgotten they even had. Marcus mentioned maybe taking a class to learn carpentry. Hannah talked about possibly opening her own restaurant someday, serving the kind of soul food that made people feel loved. They discussed traveling to places they'd only seen in magazines. They remembered what it felt like to be two people who loved each other, not just two people desperate to conceive. By the time they arrived at the small resort hotel, Hannah felt almost human again, almost alive, almost like herself. The hotel was perfect. Not fancy, but clean and comfortable with a balcony that overlooked the ocean. They had a room with white sheets and soft pillows, and the sound of waves crashing in the distance. There was wine in the mini fridge, and fresh fruit on the counter, and time. So much time. Time that didn't need to be scheduled around ovulation calendars or doctor appointments or Gloria's visits. Time that belonged only to them. The first 4 days were perfect. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense, but perfect in the way that real life can sometimes surprise you with moments of pure grace. They walked on the beach in the early mornings, when the sand was cool and the gulls were just waking up, their feet leaving temporary prints that the tide erased. They ate at small restaurants where nobody knew them, and the waitresses didn't ask if they had children. They ordered whatever they wanted without worrying about fertility-friendly foods or restricted diets. They just enjoyed the taste of good food shared between two people who loved each other. They made love in the afternoon while the sun streamed through the windows, and for the first time in years, it felt like making love instead of trying to make a baby. It felt like connection, like pleasure, like remembering why they fell in love in the first place. There was no pressure, no checking calendars, no strategic timing. Just two bodies finding each other again, rediscovering intimacy that had been buried under medical procedures and scheduled intercourse. They talked about everything and nothing. Marcus told her about his dreams, the ones he'd had before Gloria's expectations and the pressure to provide and be a father consumed him. He talked about maybe starting his own business someday, about traveling to Ghana to see where his grandmother was born, about learning to play guitar like he'd always wanted to. He shared fears he'd never voiced before, about feeling like he was failing Hannah by not being able to fix her pain, about his own disappointment that he kept hidden to protect her. Hannah told him about hers, about maybe opening her own restaurant, about cooking food that made people happy, about being more than just the woman who couldn't have children. She opened up about the depth of her pain, about Gloria's words that had burrowed into her soul, about the shame she carried every single day. Marcus listened, really listened, and held her while she cried and told her that Gloria was wrong, that she was everything he needed. For 4 days, they were just a couple in love. For 4 days, the pain didn't exist. For 4 days, the future felt bright again, like a door had opened to possibilities they had forgotten existed. Hannah felt wanted. She felt desired. She felt like more than just a failure, more than just a barren wife, more than just a disappointment to everyone around her. She felt human again. On the evening of the 4th day, they sat on their balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Marcus had his arm around her shoulders. Hannah leaned into him, feeling safe and loved and whole, in a way she hadn't felt in so long. The ocean breeze was cool on her skin, carrying the smell of salt and possibility. "Thank you for bringing me here," Hannah whispered. Thank you for reminding me who we are. Marcus kissed the top of her head, his lips lingering in her hair. I needed this too, baby. I needed to remember why I married you. Not to have kids, but because I love you. Just you. Always you. The fifth day, everything changed. Marcus's phone rang while they were having breakfast on the balcony, both of them still in their pajamas, lazy and content. It was his boss. Hannah watched Marcus's face change as he listened, watched the tension return to his shoulders, the worry crease his forehead, watched their perfect bubble begin to deflate in real time. There was an emergency at the office. A major deal was falling through, contracts were being disputed, clients were threatening to walk. They needed Marcus back immediately. Today. As soon as possible. His job might be at risk if he didn't come back and help fix the situation. The warehouse contract they'd been negotiating for months was on the verge of collapse, and Marcus was the only one who understood the specifics well enough to salvage it. When he hung up, he looked at Hannah with devastation in his eyes. Baby, I'm so sorry. I have to go back. Today. Right now. Hannah's first instinct was to pack up too, to go with him, to not let this perfect weekend prematurely. But Marcus stopped her. He took both her hands in his and looked at her with such earnestness it made her chest ache. No, you stay. Please. You deserve this time. You deserve peace and rest, and to not think about anything back home. The hotel is paid for through the end of the week. Stay. Finish the vacation. Enjoy the beach. Relax. Read that book you brought. Sleep in. Do nothing. I'll make this up to you, I promise. But please, baby, take this time for yourself. Hannah hesitated. The old fears crept in immediately. What if something happens? What if Gloria comes by and I'm not there? What if people think I'm abandoning you? Let her. We'll deal with it together when you get back. But right now, I need you to do something for yourself. I need you to remember that you matter, that your rest matters, that you're more than just my wife or Gloria's daughter-in-law. You're Hannah, and Hannah deserves this week. Stay, please. Marcus's voice was firm, almost pleading. He needed her to do this, needed her to choose herself for once. And something in his tone told Hannah that this was important to him, that he needed to know she could accept this gift. So she agreed. She helped him pack his bag, folding his clothes while fighting back tears. She kissed him goodbye at the hotel entrance. A long, passionate kiss that tasted like salt from the ocean air and promises yet to be kept. And she remembered the pregnancy test tucked inside, the one she had bought on a whim before they left, even though she knew it was probably pointless, even though she had taken 100 tests before and they had all been negative, even though she was trying not to think about it during this vacation. She almost didn't take it. What was the point? Why ruin this peaceful evening with another disappointment? But something compelled her to pull it out. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope that refused to die no matter how many times it had been crushed. Maybe it was just wanting to confirm what she already knew, so she could truly move on. She took the test without expecting anything. And then she watched, barely breathing, as 2 pink lines appeared. Clear and unmistakable. 2 lines. Hannah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the bathroom floor, the test clutched in her shaking hand. She looked at it again. Still 2 lines. She blinked. Still 2 lines. She read the instructions 3 times to make sure she was reading it correctly. 2 lines meant pregnant. 2 lines meant yes. 2 lines meant the miracle she had begged God for, cried for, prayed for, was finally impossibly happening. She screamed, a sound of pure joy that echoed off the bathroom tiles and probably startled the guests in neighboring rooms. She laughed. She cried. She looked at the test again to make sure it was real, that she wasn't hallucinating, that this wasn't some cruel trick of her desperate mind. But it was real. She was pregnant. After 2 years of trying, after hundreds of tears, after all the shame and the disappointment and the cruel words from Gloria, after believing she was broken beyond repair, her body had finally done what it was supposed to do. She was going to have Marcus's baby. She was going to be a mother. Hannah wanted to call Marcus immediately, to scream the news through the phone, to share this impossible joy with the person who had suffered through every disappointment with her. But something stopped her. This was too important for a phone call. This deserved to be a moment, a surprise, something beautiful and perfect that she could give him face to face, in person, when they were together again. She could already imagine his face, the shock, the disbelief, the joy washing over him like sunrise. She imagined his hands on her belly, protective and tender. She imagined telling Gloria that yes, actually, she could get pregnant. Yes, actually, she was woman enough. Yes, actually, she wasn't worthless after all. Hannah spent the rest of the evening planning how she would tell him. She went to the hotel gift shop and bought a little baby onesie, the smallest one they had. It was white with yellow ducks on it and said "Made with Love" across the front. She bought a card and sat at the desk in the hotel room, trying to find words big enough for this moment. "You're going to be a daddy," she finally wrote. Simple, perfect, everything. She wrapped everything carefully and rehearsed what she would say. She practiced different versions, trying them out loud to the empty room. "Surprise, baby, we're having a baby." No, too simple. "Remember how we stopped trying?" Well, too casual. Maybe she'd just hand him the package and watch his face as he opened it. Yes, that felt right. Hannah went to sleep that night with the pregnancy test on the nightstand where she could see it, proof that she wasn't dreaming. She slept better than she had in 2 years, her hand resting on her still flat belly, already talking to the tiny cluster of cells growing inside her. "Hi, baby," she whispered into the darkness. "Your daddy and I have been waiting for you for so long. You're already so loved, so wanted. You're our miracle." She dreamed of a future that was finally happening. She dreamed of Marcus's face when she told him. She dreamed of a nursery painted in soft colors. She dreamed of tiny fingers wrapping around hers. She dreamed of becoming the mother she had always wanted to be. She woke up the next morning and checked the test again. Still positive, still real. She was still pregnant. This was really, truly happening. For the first time in years, Hannah woke up with hope. Real hope. The kind that fills your chest and makes you believe in miracles. The kind that makes you think maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. Maybe Gloria would soften. Maybe the community would celebrate with them. Maybe this baby would heal all the wounds that had been carved into her heart. She had 3 more days before she would go home and tell Marcus. 3 more days to hold this precious secret close to her heart. 3 more days to dream and plan and imagine a future that was finally unfolding the way it was supposed to. Hannah didn't know that Marcus would never hear the news. She didn't know that in just hours everything would shatter. She didn't know that this moment of pure joy would become the cruelest memory she would carry for the rest of her life. But in that moment, on that morning, Hannah Mitchell was happy. Completely, utterly, perfectly happy. And for one brief, beautiful moment, that was enough. Hannah woke the next morning, still floating, in that perfect bubble of joy. Before she even opened her eyes fully, her hand reached for the nightstand, fingers searching for the pregnancy test. It was still there. She held it up to the morning light streaming through the balcony doors. 2 pink lines. Still positive. Still real. She wasn't dreaming. She was really, truly pregnant. She lay there for a while, her other hand resting on her belly, talking quietly to the tiny life growing inside her. "Good morning, little one. Your daddy's going to be so happy when he finds out about you. We've been waiting for you for so long." After a leisurely breakfast on the balcony, Hannah spent the morning perfecting her surprise. She had already wrapped the onesie and written the card, but now she added little touches. She bought a balloon from the hotel gift shop that said, "Congratulations." She practiced different ways of handing Marcus the package. She imagined his face 1,000 times, each imagining making her smile wider. But as the day wore on, Hannah started checking her phone more frequently. Marcus had said he would call when he got home safe. That should have been late yesterday evening, maybe midnight at the latest if he stopped for dinner. But there had been no call, no text, nothing. Hannah tried calling him. It went straight to voicemail. She left a message, keeping her voice light and cheerful. "Hey, baby, just checking in. Hope you made it home okay. Call me when you get this. Love you." An hour passed, then 2. Hannah tried calling again. Still voicemail. She texted, "Marcus, I'm starting to worry. Please call me." She told herself not to panic. His phone probably died. He was probably exhausted and fell asleep the moment he got home. He was probably dealing with the work crisis and forgot to charge his phone. There were a dozen reasonable explanations. But as afternoon turned to evening, the worry gnawed at her stomach. This wasn't like Marcus. He always called, even when he was busy, even when he was tired. He always made time to check in with her. Always. Hannah tried calling Gloria's number, something she never did voluntarily. It rang and rang. No answer. She tried Marcus's work number. No answer there either, which made sense since it was Sunday. She tried his best friend James. No answer. The hotel room suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Hannah paced, phone clutched in her hand, willing it to ring. She kept checking to make sure the ringer was on, that she hadn't somehow missed his call. Nothing. "Please call me, baby," she whispered to the phone. "Please just let me know you're okay." Night fell. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone. 24 hours since Marcus left. No word, no explanation. Her joy had curdled into anxiety, a sick feeling in her gut that something was wrong. Very wrong. At 11:30 that night, there was a knock on the door. Hannah's heart leaped. Marcus. It had to be Marcus. He'd driven back to surprise her. His phone had died, and instead of calling from someone else's phone, he'd just decided to come back. That was so like him, romantic and impulsive. She would be mad at him for worrying her, but then she'd forgive him and tell him the news and everything would be perfect. She practically ran to the door, a smile already forming on her face, relief flooding through her. She opened the door. 2 police officers stood in the hallway. Their faces were somber, grave. One was older with gray hair and lines etched deep around his eyes. The other was younger, looking uncomfortable, his hand resting on his belt. The smile died on Hannah's face. Everything inside her went cold. "Ma'am, are you Hannah Mitchell?" the older officer asked. The world tilted. Hannah gripped the doorframe. "Yes, what's wrong? Is it Marcus? Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay." The officers exchanged a glance. That glance told Hannah everything. Before they spoke, she knew. Your body knows before your mind can process it. Your soul recognizes devastation before it arrives. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry. There's been an accident." "What kind of accident? Where is he? Which hospital?" Hannah's voice was rising, panic clawing up her throat. "I need to go to him. Please just tell me where my husband is." "Ma'am," the older officer said gently, and that gentleness was worse than anything. "Your husband's vehicle was involved in a collision yesterday evening on Highway 95. Another vehicle crossed the median. The impact was severe." "But he's alive, right?" Hannah heard herself saying, her voice strange and distant. "He's at the hospital. He's going to be okay. Just tell me where he is, please." The younger officer looked away. The older one met her eyes with practiced compassion. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. Your husband died at the scene. It was instantaneous. He didn't suffer." The words made no sense. They were sounds without meaning, syllables that couldn't connect to reality. Marcus was dead? No, that wasn't possible. That couldn't be possible. She had just seen him yesterday morning. He had kissed her goodbye. He had said he loved her. He had promises to keep, a baby to meet, a future to live. Dead people don't make promises. Dead people don't have emergencies at work. Dead people don't exist in future tense. "No," Hannah said, "just that. A flat refusal of reality." "Ma'am, I know this is difficult." "No, you're wrong. You've made a mistake. Check again. Check the license plate. Check the name. It's not him. It can't be him." Even as she said it, she knew it was true. She could feel the truth of it settling into her bones like ice. Marcus was gone. Her husband was dead. The man who had held her face and told her she mattered was never coming home. The father of the baby growing inside her would never know he was going to be a father. Hannah's legs gave out. She collapsed right there in the doorway, a sound tearing from her throat that didn't sound human. It was grief made audible, pain given voice, a heart breaking so loudly the whole world should have heard it. "No, no, 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 no," she kept saying, rocking back and forth. The pregnancy test was still on the nightstand inside the room, those two pink lines mocking her now. Please, God, no. Please, not him. Please. The officers tried to help her up, tried to get her to sit on the bed, but she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. How do you breathe when your reason for breathing is gone? How do you stand when the ground beneath you has disappeared? Ma'am, is there someone we can call for you? Family? A friend? Family? Hannah almost laughed, but it came out as a sob. Gloria. She would have to call Gloria. The woman who hated her would now be the only family she had left. The cruel irony of it made her want to scream. The officers stayed with her for over an hour. They called the hotel staff. Someone brought water that Hannah couldn't drink. Someone brought tissues that couldn't possibly be enough. They asked questions she could barely process. Did she have a way to get home? Did she need help making arrangements? Did she understand what they were telling her? No, she didn't understand. She would never understand. How do you understand that the universe can take everything from you in the time it takes for one car to cross a highway median? How do you understand that you can go from the happiest moment of your life to the worst in the span of 24 hours? Eventually, the officers left. They had done their duty. They had delivered the worst news anyone could receive. They left her with cards and phone numbers and information about claiming his belongings, as if any of that mattered, as if paperwork could bring him back. Hannah sat on the hotel bed holding the pregnancy test, and the cruel irony of it made her want to die. Yesterday, this had been a miracle. Today, it was a curse. This was supposed to be the best news of her life. This was supposed to fix everything, heal everything, make everything worth it. Instead, Marcus would never know. He would never see his child, never hold them, never teach them, never be a father. He had died thinking they couldn't have children, died not knowing that his body had finally done what it was supposed to do, that he was leaving behind a piece of himself. Hannah looked at the wrapped package on the desk, the onesie that said, "Made with love," the card that said, "You're going to be a daddy." Words he would never read, a gift he would never receive, a moment of joy that would never exist. She picked up her phone and looked at the last photo they'd taken together. On the beach, both of them smiling like they had a future, like tomorrow was guaranteed, like love was enough to protect them from the randomness of tragedy. She wanted to call him. She kept forgetting he was dead, her mind refusing to accept it. She kept thinking, I need to tell Marcus, and then remembering there was no Marcus to tell. The death happened over and over again, every time she forgot and then remembered. The bus ride home 2 days later was the longest journey of Hannah's life. She couldn't afford to fly. She couldn't afford anything. Marcus had been the one with the stable income. Now she had to figure out how to survive, how to plan a funeral, how to tell everyone that the man they loved was gone. She clutched the wrapped gift in her lap the whole way, unable to throw it away even though it would never be given. The baby onesie felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every time the bus hit a bump, she felt it in her bones, a reminder that she was still here, still alive, when Marcus was not. She arrived home in the evening. The house looked the same, and that felt wrong. Everything should look as destroyed as she felt. The grass still needed cutting. The front porch still had the chair Marcus liked to sit in. The door still opened with the same key. Gloria's car was in the driveway. Hannah's exhausted heart sank even further. She didn't have the strength for Gloria right now. But this had been Marcus's house, and Gloria had rights that Hannah's grief couldn't supersede. She had to go inside. She had to face this. She opened the door with her key. Gloria sat in the living room surrounded by Marcus's relatives Hannah barely knew. The mood was heavy, tissues everywhere, eyes red from crying. When Gloria saw Hannah, her face hardened into something cold and accusatory. "So you finally came back," Gloria said, her voice like broken glass. Hannah stood there, bags in hand, still wearing the same clothes from the vacation that felt like it happened in another lifetime. "Gloria, I'm so sorry. I came as soon as I could. You weren't here," Gloria cut her off. "My son died, and you weren't here. You were off on vacation while he was dying on that highway." The accusation hit Hannah like a physical blow. "I didn't know. If I had known, I would have been with him. He told me to stay. He wanted me to. He wanted you to be his wife. He wanted you to give him children. He wanted a lot of things you couldn't give him. The room went silent. Everyone was staring, judging, believing whatever Gloria had already told them about the inadequate wife who couldn't even give Marcus a baby. Hannah's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, to the secret growing there. Maybe this could help. Maybe this could be a bridge between them. Maybe shared grief over Marcus and shared joy over his child could bring them together. Gloria, Hannah said softly, tears streaming down her face. I know you're hurting. I'm hurting too. We both loved him so much, but I need to tell you something. Something important. Something Marcus would have wanted you to know. She took a breath, holding tight to the gift in her hand. I'm pregnant. We're going to have Marcus's baby. For a moment, Hannah hoped for tears of joy, hoped for an embrace, hoped for connection in shared grief and shared hope. A grandchild, the thing Gloria had wanted for so long, proof that Hannah wasn't worthless, proof that Marcus's legacy would live on. What she got was something far worse. Gloria's face twisted with rage. She stood up so fast her chair nearly fell. That baby isn't Marcus's. The room went deadly silent. Hannah felt like she'd been slapped. What? Gloria, of course it is. How can you even… You were there alone, Gloria spat, her voice venomous. My son left you there alone for days, and now suddenly, conveniently, after 2 years of being barren, you're pregnant. I just found out. The night before Hannah couldn't say died, couldn't make the word real. Gloria, please, I would never… You couldn't give him a child when he was alive. Gloria's voice was rising, shrill with accusation. But now that he's dead, now that it's convenient, now that you might get his life insurance and his benefits, suddenly you're carrying his baby? She laughed, a whore. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what you did? You were alone in that hotel for days. Who knows who you were with? Who knows what you did? Gloria, I love Marcus. I loved him more than anything. This is his baby, our baby, the baby we've been trying for. Hannah was shaking, her hands held out in desperate supplication. Liar! Gloria screamed, and the relatives flinched but said nothing. No one defended Hannah. You're a liar and a cheat, and I will not stand here and listen to you disrespect my son's memory. You couldn't give him what he needed in life, and now you want to profit from his death? No, absolutely not. This is my home. Marcus was my husband. I have every right. This house belonged to Marcus, Gloria said coldly, and Hannah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. His name is on the deed, his name alone, which means it's mine now, and you have 3 days to pack your things and get out. The world tilted again. What? You can't… 3 days, Hannah. I want you gone. Pack your things and leave. You are not welcome here. You were never family. You were a mistake my son made, and I will not let you destroy his memory with your lies. Gloria, please, I have nowhere to go. I'm pregnant, please. If that baby were really my grandchild, I would know it. I would feel it. But I feel nothing but disgust looking at you. 3 days. Or I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Hannah looked around the room desperately, searching for an ally, someone who would tell Gloria she was being cruel and unreasonable. But they all looked away. They all believed Gloria. They all thought Hannah was lying, cheating, trying to profit from Marcus's death. I'm carrying your grandchild, Hannah said again, her voice breaking. Marcus's child. Please don't do this, please. Gloria's face was stone, cold, unmoved. That baby is not my grandchild. And in 3 days, if you're not out of this house, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you really are. Do you understand me? Hannah understood. She understood that she had just lost everything. Her husband, her home, her community, her hope. She had come home to bury Marcus and found herself being buried instead. She turned and walked out of her own house, the wrapped gift still clutched in her hand. She sat on the front steps, the same steps where she and Marcus used to sit on summer evenings, and she cried, deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place so dark she didn't know it existed. Marcus was dead. Gloria had turned everyone against her, and she was pregnant with a baby whose father would never hold them, whose grandmother refused to acknowledge they existed. The pregnancy test was still in her bag. She pulled it out and looked at those two pink lines through her tears. 24 hours ago, they had meant hope. Now they meant nothing. Now they were just proof that God had a cruel sense of humor, that you could get everything you prayed for and still lose everything that mattered. Hannah sat on those steps as the sun set, as the night grew dark and cold. She sat there because she had nowhere else to go. She sat there because moving meant accepting this was real. She sat there and wondered how she would survive. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, Hannah Mitchell realized that her nightmare had only just begun. Hannah had 3 days, 72 hours to pack up a life, to sort through 5 years of marriage while her heart was still bleeding, to figure out where she would go when she had nowhere to go. 3 days felt like both an eternity and no time at all. She had no family of her own. Her mother had died of cancer when Hannah was 22. Her father had followed 2 years later, his heart giving out from what the doctors called natural causes, but what Hannah knew was grief. She was an only child. There were distant cousins somewhere, people she hadn't spoken to in a decade, people who wouldn't take in a pregnant widow they barely knew. Marcus had been her family. His community had been her community. And now, because of Gloria's lies, she had neither. The first day, Hannah moved through the house in a fog of shock. She couldn't make herself pack. She would pick up one of Marcus's shirts and then just hold it, breathing in his scent, unable to accept that he was really gone. She found herself waiting for him to come home, listening for his key in the lock, his footsteps on the stairs, and then remembering over and over again that he was never coming home. On the second day, Hannah learned about Marcus's funeral through Facebook. Not from Gloria, not from any of the relatives who had witnessed her humiliation, from a public post announcing the service, the date and time and location, and at the bottom in Gloria's words, private service for immediate family and close friends only. Hannah called the funeral home. Her hands shook as she dialed. "I'm Marcus Mitchell's wife," she said to the funeral director. "I need to know about the arrangements. I need to be there." There was a long pause. "Ma'am, I've been given specific instructions by Mrs. Mitchell Sr. that you are not to attend. If you show up, I've been told to call the police." "She can't do that. I'm his wife. I have every right." "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Mrs. Mitchell Sr. has made it very clear. If you attend, she will have you arrested for trespassing and disruption. I cannot allow a scene at a funeral. Perhaps you could visit the grave later, privately." Hannah hung up without another word. She couldn't speak through the tears choking her throat. She wasn't allowed to say goodbye to her own husband. She wasn't allowed to mourn publicly. She was being erased from Marcus's life as if their marriage had never existed. On the morning of the funeral, Hannah stood across the street from the church, hidden behind a parked van. She watched people arrive, people she knew, people from their church, their community, their lives. They walked past her without seeing her, without knowing she was there. She watched Gloria arrive dressed in black, leaning on Marcus's uncle for support. She watched them all file into the church for a service Hannah wasn't allowed to attend. She waited outside for over an hour, standing in the cold until they came back out. She watched them drive to the cemetery, and she followed, staying far back, staying hidden. At the graveside, Hannah stood behind a tree where she couldn't be seen. She watched them lower Marcus's casket into the ground, watched Gloria collapse against someone, sobbing. Watched people throw flowers onto the casket. Watched them say goodbye to the man Hannah loved more than anything in the world. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run to the grave and throw herself across it. She wanted to tell them all that Gloria was lying, that she had loved Marcus faithfully, that she was carrying his child, but she stayed hidden, biting her fist to keep from making noise, tears streaming silently down her face. When everyone left, when the cemetery workers started shoveling dirt onto the casket, Hannah finally approached. She knelt in the mud, not caring that it ruined her clothes. She put her hand on the fresh dirt. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I love you so much. And I'm going to have your baby, our baby, the one we wanted for so long. I wish you could know. I wish you could be here." She stayed until the cemetery workers told her she had to leave. She walked away from Marcus's grave feeling like she'd buried her own heart with him. When Hannah returned to the house that evening, her key wouldn't work. Gloria had changed the locks on the second day, not even waiting the full 3 days she'd promised. Hannah stood on the porch of what had been her home, trying the key again and again, unable to accept what this meant. Everything she owned was inside that house, her clothes, her photos, the few pieces of jewelry her mother had left her. Everything. And now she couldn't get to any of it. The house was in Marcus's name. Everything in it legally belonged to his estate, which meant it belonged to Gloria. Hannah had 2 suitcases in her car. That was all. 2 suitcases she'd packed for the vacation. She had $347 in her checking account. She had no family, no home, no way to get her belongings back. She was effectively homeless. She tried calling friends from church, women she had known for years, women she had sat next to in Bible study, women she had considered sisters. Her calls went to voicemail, every single one. She left messages, her voice breaking, explaining that Marcus was dead, that Gloria had thrown her out, that she needed help. No one called back. She tried showing up at Sister Patricia's house, a woman who had always been kind to her. Patricia saw her through the window. Hannah knocked, called out her name. Patricia looked right at her and then closed the curtains. Didn't answer the door, pretended Hannah didn't exist. Gloria had gotten to them first, had spread her poison, told her lies. And they all believed her. Why wouldn't they? Gloria was Marcus's mother, a respected woman in the church. Hannah was just the wife who couldn't give Marcus children, the wife who was alone on vacation when he died, the wife who suddenly claimed to be pregnant after 2 years of infertility. Hannah heard the whispers when she walked down the street, saw how people looked at her and then looked away quickly, heard fragments of conversations. Can't believe she would do that to Marcus. Always seems so sweet, but you never know. Poor Gloria, having to deal with that woman on top of everything. The shame was suffocating. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her, judging her, condemning her. She was a public scandal, a cautionary tale, a woman who had betrayed her husband and was now trying to profit from his death. That's what they believed. That's what Gloria had made them believe. Hannah spent the first night in a cheap motel on the edge of town, $50 a night. At that rate, her money would last less than a week. The room smelled like cigarettes and desperation. The sheets were stained. The TV didn't work. But it was shelter. It was a roof. It was somewhere to sleep. She tried to find work. She went to restaurants, showed them her resume, explained her experience. But she was visibly grieving, dark circles under her eyes, unable to keep tears from welling up at random moments. And word had spread about her, about the scandal. No one wanted to hire someone with that kind of baggage, that kind of reputation. "I'm sorry," they would say, not meeting her eyes. "We'll keep your resume on file." The money ran out after 2 weeks. Hannah went to the motel office to ask if she could pay later, if she could work it off somehow. The manager, a thin man with yellow teeth, looked her up and down. "You can't pay, you can't stay. Those are the rules. You got until tonight to clear out. Please, I just need a few more days to find work. I'll pay you back. I promise." "I've heard that before, sweetheart. Cash up front or you're out." That night, Hannah slept in her car. It was cold, uncomfortable. She couldn't stretch out, but it was better than nothing. She told herself it was temporary. She would find work tomorrow. She would figure this out. But then the cramps started. She was in a bus station bathroom 3 days later, trying to clean up, when she felt the first one. A sharp twist in her abdomen that made her double over. She gripped the sink, her knuckles white, and told herself it was nothing. Just normal pregnancy discomfort. Just her body adjusting. Then came another cramp, harder, longer, a wave of pain that stole her breath. "No," Hannah whispered, staring at her reflection in the grimy mirror. "Please, God, no. Not this too. Please, not this." But God wasn't listening. Or he was. And the answer was yes. Yes, this too. Yes, everything. Yes, even the one thing you have left. The cramps intensified. Hannah locked herself in a stall, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her clothes. She felt wetness between her legs. When she looked, she saw blood. So much blood. No, 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 she kept saying, but her body didn't listen. The cramping was unbearable now, waves of pain that made her gasp and sweat and pray for it to stop. She knew what was happening. She had miscarried before, years ago, before Marcus, and she recognized this pain, recognized this loss. She was losing the baby, Marcus's baby, the miracle child they had prayed for, the one piece of him that was supposed to survive, the tiny life that had made her believe she still had purpose, still had something to live for. Gone. Hannah sat on that filthy bathroom floor for hours, bleeding and crying, and feeling pieces of her hope wash away in blood and tears. People knocked on the door. She didn't answer. Someone called through the door asking if she was okay. She couldn't speak. She could only hold herself and rock and whisper apologies to the baby who would never be born, to Marcus who would never be a father, to herself for being so broken that even this, even her own body growing a child, was too much to ask. When it was over, when the worst of the bleeding had stopped and the cramps had faded to a dull ache, Hannah cleaned herself up as best she could. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Hollow eyes, gray skin, the face of someone who had lost everything. She needed medical attention. She knew that. But when she walked to the emergency room and explained what had happened, the intake nurse's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Do you have insurance?" "No." "Can you provide payment information?" Hannah looked at her empty wallet. "I have maybe $30. Ma'am, without insurance or ability to pay, we can't admit you for non-emergency care. The active miscarriage has passed. If you start hemorrhaging, come back immediately. Otherwise, we recommend rest and follow up with your OBGYN. "I don't have an OBGYN. I don't have insurance. I don't have anything. I just lost my baby. Please." "I'm sorry, ma'am, I really am. But without payment, there's nothing we can do. If you're experiencing a medical emergency, we can treat you. But from what you've described, the miscarriage is complete. I'm sorry for your loss." Hannah left. She walked out of the hospital still bleeding, still in pain, alone and unhelped, and realizing she had officially fallen through every safety net that was supposed to catch people like her. That night, she slept in an alley behind a restaurant. She couldn't afford gas to keep the car running for heat. She couldn't afford a motel. She couldn't afford anything. She found a piece of cardboard to lie on, positioned herself between two dumpsters where she might be hidden from view, and she tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. She lay there in the dark, in the cold, smelling garbage and hearing rats scurrying nearby. And she realized this was it. This was her life now. From wife to widow to nothing. From a home to a motel to an alley. From pregnant and hopeful to bleeding and broken on a piece of cardboard behind a restaurant. Marcus was dead. The baby was dead. Her home was gone. Her money was gone. Her friends were gone. Her dignity was gone. Everything that had made Hannah Mitchell who she was had been systematically stripped away in less than 3 weeks. She was officially homeless, officially alone, officially at rock bottom with no way back up. And as she lay there in that alley, watching the stars through the gap between buildings, Hannah remembered Gloria's words. "You're worth nothing." For 2 years she had heard those words. For 2 years she had tried not to believe them. But now, lying on cardboard in an alley, bleeding from a miscarriage with no one to help her, no one to care, no one to even notice if she died right there, Hannah began to believe it was true. Maybe Gloria was right. Maybe she really was worthless. Look at her now, homeless, alone, a woman who couldn't keep her husband alive, couldn't carry a baby to term, couldn't maintain friendships, couldn't hold on to a home, couldn't do anything right. She looked down at her hands, dirty and shaking. These hands used to cook meals that people loved. These hands used to hold Marcus's face and make him laugh. These hands had held a positive pregnancy test and dreamed of holding a baby. Now they were just the hands of a homeless woman. Worthless hands, belonging to a worthless woman. Hannah closed her eyes and wished she could disappear. Wished she could simply stop existing. Wished that the universe would take mercy on her and let her fade away into nothing, because nothing was all she had left. Nothing was all she was. The compound tragedies of poverty had caught her in their grip. Society had abandoned her the moment she fell. And Hannah Mitchell, who had done nothing wrong except love a man who died and carry a baby who didn't survive, discovered what it meant to be truly invisible. Nobody came looking for her. Nobody checked if she was okay. Nobody cared that she was dying slowly in an alley behind a restaurant. She had fallen through the cracks, and in America, falling through the cracks meant disappearing completely. As a black woman without support, without resources, without anyone to vouch for her, or believe her, or help her, Hannah had become nothing. Just another statistic. Just another face that people would look through on the street. Just another tragedy that could have been prevented but wasn't. She was invisible, worthless, nothing, just like Gloria had always said. Weeks passed. Hannah stopped counting days because time had stopped meaning anything. When every day is the same struggle to survive, when every night is the same battle to find somewhere safe to sleep, when every moment is consumed by hunger and cold and fear, the calendar becomes irrelevant. You stop marking time. You just exist, one breath to the next, 1 hour to the next, trying to make it through. Winter came early that year, and the urban streets became brutal. The cold was unforgiving, seeping into Hannah's bones no matter how many layers she wore. She had one thin jacket that she'd been wearing since the vacation, inadequate for the dropping temperatures. She learned to stuff newspaper under her clothes for insulation, to keep moving to generate body heat, to huddle in doorways where the wind couldn't cut through quite as easily. She ate from garbage bins behind restaurants. The shame of it had faded after the first week because hunger eventually overpowers everything else. She learned which places threw out food that was still edible, which dumpsters to check at what times. The Italian restaurant on 5th Street tossed their unsold pasta at 9 p.m. The sandwich shop on the corner threw out day-old bread every morning. The Chinese place had the best leftovers on Sundays. She ate things she never would have considered before. Half-eaten pizza pulled from trash bags, French fries someone had left on their plate, bread crusts, apple cores, anything that could quiet the constant gnawing in her stomach. She stopped thinking about where the food had been, whose mouse it had touched. She just ate and tried not to vomit it back up. She slept wherever she could find shelter, in alleys when the weather was tolerable, under bridges when it rained, in abandoned buildings when she could find ones that weren't already claimed by others, by people more desperate and dangerous than she was. She learned to sleep lightly, to wake at the smallest sound, to always know where her exits were. She learned about danger, real danger, the kind that comes from being a woman alone on the streets with no one to protect her, no one to call for help. Men approached her. Some wanted to buy her services. Some didn't want to pay. She learned to run, to hide, to make herself as invisible as possible. She learned which corners to avoid, which alleys were too isolated, which shelters to stay away from, because the predators knew to hunt there. Being a black woman added layers to her vulnerability. Police didn't see her as a person needing help. They saw her as a problem to be moved along, a blight on the neighborhood. "Move along," they would say, not caring where she was supposed to move to. Business owners called the cops on her if she sat too long in one spot. She was bad for business, bad for the image, bad for property values. She tried the shelter once, stood in line for hours in the cold, waiting for a bed. When she finally got to the front, they told her they were at capacity, no space. Try again tomorrow. But tomorrow was the same, and the day after that. There were too many people and not enough beds, too many broken people and not enough help. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the cold or the fear. The worst part was being seen by people who used to know her. She would be searching through a garbage bin and look up to see someone from church walking past. They would glance at her, and she would see the moment of recognition in their eyes. "Is that? No, it can't be." And then they would look away quickly, deliberately, as if she were something shameful they didn't want to acknowledge. Sister Patricia walked past her once. Hannah was sitting on a corner, trying to warm her hands, and Patricia walked by with her shopping bags, looked right at Hannah, and kept walking. No acknowledgement, no help, no basic human recognition. Just a deliberate turning away, a choice to pretend Hannah didn't exist. The erosion of dignity was constant. Hannah couldn't remember the last time she'd showered. She washed in public bathroom sinks when she could, but it wasn't the same. Her clothes were filthy. Her hair was matted. She smelled. She knew she smelled. She saw how people wrinkled their noses and gave her a wide berth when she walked past. She was invisible and too visible all at once. Invisible in the ways that mattered, when she needed help or kindness or basic human decency. Too visible when people wanted to judge her, to move her along, to make sure she knew she didn't belong. Gloria's words played on repeat in her head like a broken record. "You're worth nothing." The words had taken root in the fertile soil of Hannah's suffering, and they had grown into something she couldn't cut out. Every night when she lay down on cardboard or concrete, she heard those words. Every morning when she woke up cold and hungry and alone, she heard them. "You're worth nothing, barren, worthless, a mistake." And slowly, inevitably, Hannah began to believe it. What evidence did she have to the contrary? She couldn't keep her husband safe, couldn't carry a baby to term, couldn't hold on to a home or a community or friends, couldn't even find a job or a place to sleep. What was her value? What was her purpose? What reason was there for her continued existence? Depression settled over her like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. She stopped wanting to wake up in the mornings. Sleep was the only mercy, the only escape from consciousness, from pain, from the relentless reality of her ruined life. But every morning, despite her wishes, her eyes would open. Her lungs would keep breathing. Her heart would keep beating. Her body insisted on survival even when her mind had given up. Days blurred together into a gray nothingness. Wake up, find food, avoid danger, find shelter, sleep, repeat. There was no living in it, just existing, moving through space without purpose or direction, a ghost haunting the streets of a city that had forgotten her. The night she decided to end it started like any other, cold, dark, hopeless. Hannah had spent the day wandering, and as evening fell, she found herself walking without destination. Her feet just carried her, and she didn't fight it. She was too tired to fight anything anymore. She ended up on a bridge, the same overpass that stretched across Highway 95, the same highway where Marcus had died. She didn't plan it. Or maybe she had been planning it for weeks without realizing. Maybe her feet had known where they were going, even if her mind hadn't admitted it yet. Hannah walked to the middle of the bridge and looked down. Cars rushed past below, headlights streaking through the darkness. Metal and velocity and instant death. It would be quick, probably painless. Certainly final. Would anyone even notice? Would anyone care? Marcus was gone. The baby was gone. Hannah herself was already gone. Really. What was left was just a shell, a body going through motions, a person without purpose or value. No one would mourn her. Gloria would probably be relieved. One less person making false claims about Marcus. The community that had abandoned her wouldn't even hear about her death. She had no family left to grieve. She would die alone and be forgotten immediately. Just another nameless, homeless person who fell through the cracks. Maybe that was fitting. Maybe that was what she deserved. Hannah climbed up onto the railing. Her hands gripped the cold metal. The wind whipped at her jacket. Her body swayed slightly. One step forward and it would all be over. One step and the pain would stop. One step and she could rest. She looked down at the highway where Marcus had died. She would join him. Maybe that was okay. Maybe he was waiting for her. Maybe the baby was waiting too. Maybe death was just going home. Maybe Gloria was right, Hannah whispered to the wind. Maybe I am worth nothing. She had fought so hard. For 2 years, she had fought against Gloria's words, against her own doubt, against the shame and the pain. But she was tired now. So tired. And what was the point of fighting? Look where it had gotten her. Look what her life had become. One step. That's all it would take. Hannah closed her eyes, took a breath, prepared to let go. And then she heard it. Not with her ears, but with something deeper. A memory surfacing from the depths of her grief. Marcus's voice, clear as day, saying the words he'd said on their vacation. I love you because you're you. Not because you can have children, not because you're perfect, not because you've accomplished anything, just because you're you. And Hannah paused. Her hands still gripped the railing. Her body still swayed in the wind. But something had shifted, just slightly. Some small part of her that wasn't quite ready to give up. She didn't know what stopped her. It wasn't hope because she had no hope left. It wasn't faith because God had abandoned her. It wasn't fear because she wasn't afraid of death anymore. She was afraid of living, but death felt like mercy. But something made her hesitate. Something whispered, wait. Maybe it was Marcus's voice in her memory. Maybe it was God after all, finally answering her prayers with a single word. Not yet. Maybe it was just exhaustion, too tired even to jump, too tired to make the final decision. Or maybe it was something deeper, some small spark of survival instinct that refused to be extinguished, some tiny piece of Hannah Mitchell that still believed, despite all evidence to the contrary, that she mattered. Hannah stood on that railing for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Cars passed below, oblivious. The city hummed around her, indifferent to her crisis. And slowly, without making a conscious decision, she climbed back down. Not because she wanted to live, not because she'd had some revelation or found hope, but because in that moment she was too tired to jump, too numb to make even that final choice, too empty to do anything except climb down and walk away. She found an abandoned building a few blocks away and curled up in a corner. She didn't sleep. She just lay there staring at nothing, feeling nothing, being nothing. Waiting for morning even though she didn't want morning to come. But it did. Morning always comes. The sun rose. Light filtered through broken windows. And Hannah was still breathing. She opened her eyes and felt surprise. I'm still here, she whispered to the empty room. I survived the night. She didn't know how to feel about that. Relief, disappointment, confusion, all of it, none of it. She felt empty, hollowed out, like all her emotions had been burned away, leaving nothing but ash. But she was alive. Somehow, impossibly, inexplicably, she was still alive. And if she was going to be alive, if her body was going to keep insisting on survival even when her mind had given up, then she needed to face the practical realities of continued existence. She needed to eat, not because she wanted to, not because she had hope or plans or reasons to live, but because her stomach hurt, because her body demanded fuel, because the animal part of her that didn't care about depression or despair or wanting to die insisted on the basics of survival. If I'm going to survive, Hannah said out loud, her voice rough and strange, I need to eat. It wasn't a declaration of hope. It wasn't a decision to keep fighting. It was just a statement of fact, the barest minimum requirement of staying alive. One more day, just one more day of existence, because apparently that's what her body had decided to do. Hannah pulled herself to her feet. Every part of her hurt. Her body ached from sleeping on concrete. Her stomach cramped with hunger. Her head pounded. But she was standing. She was moving. She was, against all odds and contrary to her desires, alive. She walked out of the abandoned building into the gray morning light. The city was waking up around her. People heading to jobs, to lives, to purposes and meanings she no longer understood. Hannah wasn't one of them. She was separate, apart, invisible, but she was going to eat. Not because she wanted to live, just because she was alive and eating was what living things did. She headed toward the park, toward the area where she sometimes found dropped food or could beg enough change for something from a vendor. She didn't think about tomorrow. She didn't think about hope. She didn't think about anything except the immediate need for food. That's where she was, in that dark place where survival was just biology and not choice, when everything changed. That's where she was when she discovered that sometimes you don't survive for yourself. Sometimes you survive because someone else needs you to. Sometimes the reason you didn't jump off that bridge last night becomes clear in the light of morning. Sometimes when you're at your absolute lowest, when you've lost everything, including the will to live, that's when life shows you exactly why you're still here. Hannah wandered into the park as the early morning fog was just beginning to lift. The city was waking up around her, but she moved through it like a ghost, separate from the world of the living. She had learned that parks sometimes yielded dropped food, lost change, things people discarded or forgot. It was better than dumpster diving, more dignified somehow. though she wasn't sure dignity meant anything anymore. Her feet hurt, everything hurt, but she kept moving because that's what bodies do when they refuse to give up, even when minds have. She scanned the ground as she walked, looking for anything useful: a half-eaten sandwich, dropped coins, a water bottle with liquid still in it. Her eyes were trained now to spot survival in debris. That's when she saw them. Three small children huddled together under a park bench, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. At first, Hannah thought they might be sleeping, curled up so tightly against each other they almost looked like one being. But as she got closer, she saw their eyes were open, wide and watchful, and filled with a terror so familiar it made her chest ache. They were black children, one girl and two boys, maybe 6 or 7 years old, though it was hard to tell. Hunger has a way of making children look both younger and older at the same time, innocent and ancient all at once. The girl sat in the middle, her arms wrapped protectively around both boys, as if her small body could shield them from the world. Their clothes were filthy, torn in places, layered incorrectly like they'd dressed themselves without understanding how. Their hair was matted, uncombed for weeks. Their faces were smudged with dirt and what might have been dried tears. Their eyes were sunken, their cheeks hollow. They were starving. Hannah could see it in the way their bones showed through their skin, in the way they held themselves so still, as if movement required energy they didn't have. But it was their expressions that broke something in Hannah's chest. They looked at her with hope and fear tangled together, wanting help but expecting harm, desperate but prepared to run. They looked like they had learned not to trust the world, not to expect kindness, not to believe in rescue. They looked exactly like Hannah felt. For a long moment, Hannah just stood there, staring at these three children who were somehow worse off than she was. She was homeless, broken, barely surviving. But these were children. Babies, really. And they were alone and starving and terrified. Hannah's recognition hit her like a physical blow. They're worse off than I am. She was an adult who had made choices, who had lived a life, who had known love. These children had nothing but each other and a bench to hide under. If she was suffering, what must they be feeling? "Hey, babies," Hannah said softly, her voice rough from disuse. She hadn't spoken to anyone in days. "Are you okay?" The girl's arms tightened around her brother's. "We're fine," she said, her voice small but defiant. "We don't need help. We're waiting for someone." It was a lie. Hannah could hear it in the tremor beneath the words, see it in the way the girl's eyes darted around looking for escape routes. But it was a brave lie, the kind survivors tell when they're trying to protect themselves. Hannah crouched down slowly so she wouldn't seem threatening. Her knees protested, but she ignored the pain. "You waiting for your mama?" Of the boys nodded. The other looked away. The girl said nothing, but her jaw clenched. "How long you been waiting?" Silence. Then in a whisper, "A while." Hannah looked at them, really looked. Their clothes weren't just dirty. They were inadequate for the cold. Their shoes had holes, they had no bags, no belongings, nothing but each other. This wasn't temporary. These children had been abandoned. "What are your names?" Hannah asked gently. The girl studied Hannah's face, trying to decide if she could be trusted. Finally, "I'm Laura. This is Kian." She gestured to the boy on her right. "And this is Riley. We're triplets." "Triplets," Hannah repeated. "That's special. You three must be real close." "We have to stay together," Laura said fiercely. "If the police come, if social services comes, they'll split us up. They'll put us in different homes. We won't let them. We stay together no matter what." Hannah understood. She understood the fear of being separated from the only people who loved you. "How long have your parents been gone?" Kian spoke for the first time, his voice barely audible. "Mama said she'd be back in a little while. She said to wait right here. Don't move. She'd come back for us." He looked up at Hannah with desperate hope. "She's coming back, right?" "She promised." Hannah felt tears sting her eyes, the first tears in days. She'd thought she was too numb to cry anymore. But looking at these children, abandoned by the people who should have protected them, she felt something crack open. "How long ago was that, baby?" 3 weeks, Laura said quietly. "Maybe 4. We lost count. 4 weeks. These children had been fending for themselves for 4 weeks, sleeping under this bench, hiding from authorities, eating whatever they could find, surviving. Your mama was struggling, wasn't she? Hannah said gently. Laura nodded, tears finally spilling. She tried, she really tried, but she got sick. She started using stuff that made her act different. And then one day she brought us here and told us to wait, and she just didn't come back. Riley started crying silently. Kian put his arm around his brother. Laura kept talking, the words pouring out. We thought she'd come back the next day. We waited all night, but she didn't come. And now, her voice broke, now I don't think she's coming. I think she left us because she couldn't take care of us anymore. Hannah's heart shattered. These children, barely old enough to tie their shoes, had been abandoned, and were facing that truth with courage Hannah could barely comprehend. They were cold and hungry and hopeless, but they were still protecting each other, still staying together, still surviving. Looking at them, Hannah saw herself. She saw her own pain reflected in Laura's eyes, her own fear in Kian's face, her own exhaustion in Riley's small body. These children were broken like she was broken, lost like she was lost, forgotten like she was forgotten. The difference was they still had each other, and they were children. They deserved better than this. Hannah had nothing to give. She was barely surviving herself. She had maybe $4 in her pocket, coins found in parking lots. She had no home, no resources, no ability to fix their situation. She was just another broken person, but she couldn't walk away. Whatever piece of her heart hadn't been destroyed by loss, that piece wouldn't let her leave them. I know I look like I can't help anybody, Hannah said, her voice shaking. I know I look like I'm just as broken as you are, and I am. I'm homeless. I'm hungry. I lost everything. But I can't walk away from you three. I can't leave you here like this. Laura's eyes widened. You're homeless? Yes, baby. But you look like a grown-up. Grown-ups aren't supposed to be homeless. Hannah let out a bitter sound that might have been a laugh. Yeah, well, life doesn't always work out the way it's supposed to. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled bills and loose change. $4.37. All she had. It was supposed to be for her, for surviving one more day. But looking at these children, she knew she couldn't keep it. She couldn't eat while they starved. Come on, Hannah said, standing slowly. There's a food cart 2 blocks from here. We're going to get you something to eat. The children stared at her like she'd offered them the moon. Really? Kian whispered. Really? Come on now. They emerged from under the bench, slowly, painfully, their small bodies stiff. They stood together, holding hands. Laura in the middle as always. Hannah led them through the park toward the street vendor she knew sold hot dogs. The children followed silently, occasionally glancing back as if worried this was a trick. At the cart, Hannah ordered 4 hot dogs. The vendor looked at her, at the children, and his expression softened. You need drinks too? I can't afford. On the house, he said gruffly, handing her 4 water bottles. For the kids. Kindness from strangers. It still existed. Hannah took the food to a bench and distributed the hot dogs. The children didn't eat immediately. They looked at the food like they couldn't believe it was real. Go ahead, babies, Hannah said softly. Eat. They devoured it. There was no other word. They ate like they were dying of hunger, which they were. They ate with a desperation that made Hannah's heart break all over again. She watched them eat her portion too. She couldn't eat while they were still hungry. She just couldn't. When they finished, Laura looked up at Hannah with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Are you an angel? Hannah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. No, baby, I'm not an angel. I'm just someone who knows what it's like to be forgotten. Why did you help us? Riley asked quietly. You said you're homeless too. You need that food. Hannah looked at these 3 children, at their faces that were so innocent and so damaged, and she felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt needed. She felt purposeful. She felt like maybe there was a reason she hadn't jumped off that bridge last night. Because sometimes, Hannah said slowly, working out the truth as she spoke it, sometimes we can't save ourselves. Sometimes we're too broken to fix our own lives. But maybe we can save someone else. Maybe that's enough. She looked at their faces and saw hope there, fragile but real. And she felt something stir in her chest, something that had been dead for so long. I can't save myself, Hannah whispered, but maybe I can save you three. The realization hit her like revelation, like lightning, like the answer to a question she didn't know she'd been asking. Maybe this is why I'm still here. Maybe this is why I didn't jump. Maybe this is my purpose. Laura reached out and took Hannah's hand. Her small fingers were cold and dirty and impossibly trusting. Will you come back tomorrow? And that's when Hannah understood. These children needed her, not someone perfect or wealthy or put together. They needed her, exactly as she was, broken and homeless and barely surviving. Because she understood them in a way no one else would. They needed her, and God, she needed them too. She needed a reason to wake up tomorrow. She needed a purpose bigger than her own survival. She needed something to live for. Yes, Hannah said, the word coming out strong and sure. I'll come back tomorrow, I promise. I'll bring food. I'll come every day. You hear me? Every single day. The children's faces transformed. Hope replaced despair. Trust replaced fear. You promise? Kian asked. I promise. Hannah walked away from that bench feeling different. Not healed, not whole, not suddenly okay, but different. She had a reason to survive the night now. She had a reason to wake up tomorrow morning. She had 3 small reasons to keep living when everything in her had wanted to die. She didn't know how she would feed them. She didn't know how she would protect them. She didn't know anything except that she would be back tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, because these children were depending on her. Maybe this was why she survived that night on the bridge. Maybe this was why she was still here. As Hannah walked away, she looked back once. The children were watching her, Laura with her arms around her brothers. Laura waved, a small gesture that changed everything. Hannah waved back, and for the first time in months, she smiled. It wasn't much. It was barely anything. But it was enough. Tomorrow she would come back. Tomorrow she would find more food. Tomorrow she would have a purpose. Tomorrow mattered now, and that made all the difference. Hannah returned the next morning, just as she'd promised. She had spent the night huddled in a doorway, but she'd woken before dawn with one thought: the children. She had to get to them. She had promised. She'd spent the early morning hours checking dumpsters behind restaurants, collecting what food she could find. Half a pizza from the Italian place, some bread rolls from the bakery. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She wrapped everything carefully in napkins and paper bags, trying to keep it clean. When she arrived at the park, the sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And there they were, under their bench, already awake, already waiting. When they saw her, their faces transformed. Pure joy replaced the fear that had been there yesterday. You came back, Laura breathed, like she couldn't quite believe it. I told you I would, Hannah said, kneeling down to their level. I keep my promises, babies. She distributed the food she'd collected, and the children ate with the same desperate hunger as yesterday. Hannah watched them, her heart both breaking and healing at the same time. This was her purpose now. These 3 children were why she was still alive. Over the next days, a routine established itself. Hannah would wake before dawn, check the dumpsters for food, and bring whatever she found to the children. They began waiting for her every morning, their faces lighting up when they saw her approaching. And slowly, gradually, they began to trust her. Really trust her. They stopped flinching when she moved too quickly. They started talking more, sharing bits of their lives before they were abandoned. But Hannah knew this wasn't sustainable. Scavenged food wasn't reliable or consistent. Some days she found plenty. Other days, nothing. The children needed more than scraps. They needed real meals, regular meals, enough food to heal their malnourished bodies. She needed income, real income. Hannah walked through the neighborhood looking for opportunities, and that's when she saw it. A food stand on the corner, run by an older black man she'd seen before. He sold hot dogs, sandwiches, soul food plates. The smell made her mouth water and her stomach clench with hunger. She approached him during a lull in customers, her heart pounding. She hadn't had a real conversation with anyone except the children in weeks. She was painfully aware of how she must look: dirty, homeless, desperate. "Excuse me, sir," she said. "My name is Hannah. I know I don't look like much, but I used to work as a cook. I'm good at it. I need work, and I think you could use help." She gestured to the line of customers that had formed earlier. "I'll work for food and whatever you can pay. I just need a chance." The man looked her up and down, his expression skeptical. She could see him taking in her appearance, making judgments. But there was something kind in his eyes, too. Something that saw past the dirt and desperation. "I'm Mr. Johnson," he said finally. "Why should I hire you? I got people asking me for jobs every day." "Because I'll show up," Hannah said simply. "Every single day, rain or shine, I'll be here. I need this, and I promise you won't regret it." Mr. Johnson studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You know how to work a grill?" "Yes, sir. You show up every day, you got yourself a deal. But the first day you don't show, you're done. Understand?" "Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet. Be here tomorrow at 6 a.m. We'll see what you can do." Hannah showed up at 5:30 the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning after that. She learned Mr. Johnson's system, learned what customers wanted, learned to cook with the efficiency and care that made people come back. She worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life because this job was more than income. It was survival. It was hope. It was the difference between the children eating or going hungry. Mr. Johnson paid her cash at the end of each day. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy fresh food for the children. Real food, fruit, bread, milk, things they needed to grow strong. Every evening, Hannah would bring the leftover food from the stand to the children. They would sit together under their bench, and she would watch them eat, making sure they each got enough. And somewhere along the way, they started calling her Miss Hannah. Not ma'am or lady, Miss Hannah, like she was someone who mattered, someone who belonged in their lives. Hannah started teaching them things: how to stay safe on the streets, which areas to avoid, how to recognize danger. She taught them to read using discarded newspapers and signs around the park. She would point to words and sound them out, and the children would repeat after her, hungry for knowledge the way they'd been hungry for food. She scavenged materials wherever she could find them: cardboard from behind stores, tarps from construction sites, blankets left in donation bins. She built them a small shelter in a hidden corner of the park, tucked behind bushes where they'd be less visible, less likely to be found by authorities who would separate them. As the weeks passed, Hannah began to see the children's personalities emerge from beneath the fear and hunger that had masked them. Laura was nurturing, always making sure her brothers ate first, always checking on them, always acting as the little mother even though she was no older than they were. She would divide food into 3 equal portions with careful precision, and Hannah noticed that Laura's portion was often slightly smaller, as if she'd given bits of hers to her brothers. Kian was brave and protective, always positioning himself between his siblings and potential threats. He watched everything with alert eyes, ready to grab his brother and sister and run at the first sign of danger. He reminded Hannah of Marcus in some ways, that same instinct to protect the people he loved. Riley was thoughtful and quiet, the observer. He asked deep questions that surprised Hannah. "Miss Hannah, why do people walk past us like we're not here? Miss Hannah, do you think our mama thinks about us? Miss Hannah, will we always be hungry?" She answered as honestly as she could, never talking down to them, always treating their questions with the respect they deserved. Hannah's maternal instincts, dormant for so long, awakened fully. She found herself doing things she dreamed of doing with her own child. She braided Laura's hair, working through the tangles with gentle patience, creating neat cornrows that made the little girl feel beautiful. She taught the boys to tie their shoes, practicing over and over until they got it right. She read them stories she remembered from her own childhood, acting out the voices and making them laugh. She was becoming their mother, not trying to be, not pretending to be, but actually becoming it. They needed her, and God, she needed them just as much. One evening, as they sat together sharing a meal, Riley looked up at Hannah with those thoughtful eyes and asked, "Miss Hannah, why do you help us?" Hannah paused, a piece of bread halfway to her mouth. The other two children looked at her too, waiting for the answer. Because everyone deserves to be loved, baby, Hannah said softly. Everyone. No matter what they've been through, no matter where they come from, no matter what anyone says about them. Everyone deserves to know they matter. Even us, Laura whispered. Especially you. The community started to notice. Hannah could feel eyes on them when she was with the children. Some people judged. She heard the whispers. Why doesn't she call child services? Those kids should be in the system. It's not right, them living like that. But others helped quietly. Sometimes Hannah would find bags of food left near where the children slept. Blankets would appear mysteriously. Small donations of clothes in the children's sizes. People who saw what she was doing and wanted to help but didn't want to get involved officially. One day an elderly black woman approached Hannah at the food stand. She was small and dignified, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her eyes sharp but kind. "I've been watching you," the woman said. "I'm Mrs. Davis. I live in the apartment building across from the park. I see you with those children every day." Hannah tensed, ready to defend herself, ready to explain. But Mrs. Davis held up a hand. "I see what you're doing, sister. Here, take this." She pressed a bundle into Hannah's hands. Inside was a small tent, blankets and clothes for the children. "You're doing good work. Those babies are lucky to have you." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means." "I know exactly what it means. I was you once, a long time ago. Keep loving those babies. That's all they need. Just keep showing up." Mr. Johnson's respect for Hannah grew with each passing day. She never missed a shift. Rain, snow, heat, she was always there. Her hands became skilled and quick, her cooking reliable and good. Customers started requesting her specials. "You got more heart than most people I know," Mr. Johnson told her one day. "I'm giving you more hours and better pay. You've earned it." Hannah felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just surviving. She was living with purpose. She had a job. She had children who depended on her. She had a reason to wake up every morning. The emptiness that had consumed her after Marcus's death was filling with something new. Not the same as what she'd lost, but precious in its own way. The weather was getting colder. Winter was coming in earnest now. Hannah knew they couldn't survive another harsh winter in the park. She started saving every penny Mr. Johnson paid her, trying to build up enough for a room somewhere, anywhere with heat and walls. One evening, as Hannah was braiding Laura's hair, the little girl said something that changed everything. "Mama Hannah?" It was barely a whisper. Hannah's hands stilled. Her heart stopped. "What did you call me, baby?" Laura looked scared, like she'd made a mistake. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" No, it's okay," Hannah said quickly, her voice thick with emotion. "Say it again." "Mama Hannah," Laura repeated, tears in her eyes. "Is that okay? Can we call you that?" Hannah looked at all three children, these babies she'd found broken and starving, these children she'd fed and protected and loved. She thought about Marcus. She thought about the baby she'd lost. She thought about how she'd believed she would never be a mother, how Gloria's words had convinced her she was barren and worthless. But here she was, a mother, not in the way she'd planned, not through birth or biology, but through choice and sacrifice and love. "Is that okay with you, babies?" Hannah asked, tears streaming down her face. "Can I be your mama? Even though I'm not, even though we're not—" "Yes!" all three children said at once, throwing their arms around her. "You're our mama," Kian said fiercely. "You chose us. You feed us. You take care of us. That makes you our mama." "Blood doesn't make family," Riley added quietly. "Love does. You love us, and we love you." Hannah held them close, these three children who had saved her life as much as she'd saved theirs. A family born not from blood or law, but from choice and need and love. A family forged in the fire of suffering and survival. "Then yes," Hannah whispered into their hair. "Yes, I'll be your mama, and you're my babies, my family, forever." They sat there together as the sun set, four people who had been forgotten by the world, who had found each other when they had nothing else, who had built a family from scraps and love and sheer determination to survive. Hannah Mitchell was a mother after all, not in the way she'd imagined, not in the way Gloria had deemed acceptable, but in the way that mattered most. She was a mother because she'd chosen to be, because she'd shown up, because she'd loved when love was the hardest thing in the world to give. And that made her family as real as any family had ever been. Years passed, not quickly but steadily, marked by the children's growth and Hannah's unwavering dedication. She was still technically homeless for the first year, still living from day to day, but she was no longer aimless. She had purpose. She had family. She had 3 children depending on her to show up every single morning, and that made all the difference. With Mr. Johnson's steady income and careful saving, Hannah eventually scraped together enough for a tiny rented room. One room for all 4 of them, barely bigger than a closet, with a shared bathroom down the hall and heat that only worked half the time. But it had walls. It had a door that locked. It had a roof that didn't leak. To Hannah and the children, it felt like a palace. They slept together on 2 mattresses pushed against opposite walls, Hannah and Laura on one, Kian and Riley on the other. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was theirs, their first real home. The children cried the first night they spent there, overwhelmed by the simple mercy of sleeping indoors, of being warm, of being safe. As the children grew older, Hannah faced a challenge she'd been dreading. They needed to go to school. Real school, not just the lessons she taught them from newspapers and signs. They were smart, so smart, and they deserved the education that could unlock their potential. But enrolling them meant facing questions she couldn't answer. Where were their birth certificates? Who were their legal guardians? Why had they been living on the streets? Hannah walked into the local elementary school with her heart pounding, prepared for rejection, prepared to be turned away or worse, to have the children taken from her. She met with the principal, a middle-aged black woman named Dr. Angela Freeman, who listened to Hannah's story with an expression that shifted from skepticism to something softer. "You've been caring for these children for how long?" Dr. Freeman asked. "A year and a half, ma'am, every single day. They're my children now, not legally, but in every way that matters." Dr. Freeman looked at the children standing behind Hannah, clean and well-fed, and holding Hannah's hands with obvious love and trust. She looked back at Hannah, at this woman who had chosen to mother children who weren't hers by blood, who had sacrificed everything to give them a chance. "I can't officially enroll them without proper documentation," Dr. Freeman said slowly, "but I can start a process. I can work with you to get the paperwork we need. It'll take time, but in the meantime, these children need to be in school. Let me see what I can do." It took months of bureaucratic navigation, but Dr. Freeman kept her word. She helped Hannah navigate the foster care system, helped her start the process of becoming their legal guardian, helped enroll the children with temporary paperwork that allowed them to attend while the legal issues were sorted. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't quick, but it was a start. The children thrived in school from day one. They were hungry for knowledge in the same way they'd been hungry for food, absorbing everything their teachers offered with eager intensity. But they still lived in poverty, still shared one tiny room, still wore donated clothes. Hannah made do with what they had, using public facilities to help them stay clean. They showered at the community center. They did homework at the library. They washed clothes at the laundromat. Every day was a puzzle of logistics and survival, but they made it work. Hannah's reputation in the neighborhood grew. People would point her out on the street. "That's Hannah," they'd say, "the woman who feeds the homeless children." Some said it with admiration, others with judgment. "She ain't much herself, but she never lets those kids go hungry." The whispers didn't bother Hannah anymore. Let them talk. She knew what she was doing. She knew her children were loved and fed and safe. That was all that mattered. As word spread about Hannah's dedication, small miracles started happening. Anonymous donations would appear at her food stand. Bags of clothes in the children's sizes left on her doorstep. Envelopes with cash and notes that said simply, "For the kids." People were moved by her sacrifice, inspired by her unwavering commitment to children who weren't hers by blood, but were absolutely hers by choice. Hannah saved every penny she could. She bought the same yellow floral dress from a thrift store and wore it every day for years, washing it each night and hanging it to dry. "I don't need nothing else," she would say when the children urged her to buy herself something new. "This money is for your future. Every penny. This is your chance to break the cycle, to be more than what the world says you can be." Working with Mr. Johnson had taught Hannah valuable lessons about running a food business. And after 3 years of saving and planning, she opened her own small food stand. Nothing fancy, just a cart with a grill and some storage, but it was hers. She worked from dawn to dusk, selling soul food that tasted like love because it was made with love. Fried chicken that was crispy and juicy, mac and cheese that was creamy and rich. Collard greens seasoned the way her grandmother had taught her. Cornbread that melted in your mouth. Her cooking was amazing, and people came from blocks away just to eat at Hannah's stand. They came for the food and stayed for the warmth, for the way Hannah treated every customer like family, for the way she never let anyone leave hungry even if they couldn't pay. She lived frugally, almost obsessively so. Every extra penny went to the children's needs: school supplies, clothes that fit, books, field trips. She wore the same yellow dress until it was faded and patched, but her children had what they needed, and they excelled. Laura, Kian, and Riley weren't just good students. They were exceptional. Their teachers were amazed by their intelligence, their drive, their hunger to succeed. "These children are brilliant," they would say to Hannah at parent-teacher conferences. "They have so much potential." Hannah attended every single parent-teacher conference, beaming with pride as teachers praised her children. She kept every report card, every certificate, every piece of schoolwork they brought home. She displayed them proudly at the food stand, showing customers what love and determination could create. Laura was at the top of her class in math and science, solving complex equations that baffled her peers, conducting experiments with a precision and creativity that impressed her teachers. She wanted to be an engineer, wanted to build things that would help people. Kian was a natural leader, excellent in debate and public speaking. He could command a room with his words, argue a point with logic and passion that left audiences moved. He wanted to go into business, wanted to create opportunities for people like them, people the system had written off. Riley was artistic and thoughtful, writing poetry and essays that made teachers cry, creating art that captured the beauty and pain of their experiences. He wanted to study literature, wanted to tell stories that would make people see the humanity in those they'd learned to ignore. Hannah watched them bloom and knew every sacrifice had been worth it. Every cold night, every hungry day, every moment of fear and exhaustion. All of it was worth it to see her children discover their potential. As the children grew into teenagers, they started working alongside Hannah at the stand after school and on weekends. The four of them worked as a team, cooking together, serving customers, managing money. Hannah taught them everything she knew about business. "Learn everything you can," she would tell them. "Watch how I handle money, how I talk to customers, how I plan inventory. This knowledge will serve you no matter what you do." But as they got older, the triplets started to worry about Hannah. She worked too hard, slept too little, never took care of herself. They saw how thin she'd become, how tired she looked, how the years of sacrifice had aged her beyond her years. "Mama, you deserve better," Laura would say. "Let us help you now. We can work more hours. You can rest." "You should buy yourself new clothes," Kian would add. "You've worn that yellow dress for years. You deserve nice things too." "We hate seeing you sacrifice so much," Riley said quietly. "When do you get to live for yourself?" But Hannah refused to take what they needed. "Y'all are my investment," she would say firmly. "You're going to college. You're going to be more than I ever was. That's what matters. I don't need anything else." The children would look at each other with determination in their eyes. They had long conversations late at night when they thought Hannah was asleep, making promises to each other about the future. One day, they would whisper, "We'll repay her for everything. We'll give her the life she gave us. We'll make sure she never has to struggle again." One evening, as they all sat together after closing the stand, Kian voiced what they'd all been thinking. "Mama, one day we'll repay you for everything you've done for us." Hannah looked at her 3 children, now 17 years old, tall and strong and brilliant, and tears filled her eyes. "You already have," she said, her voice breaking. "You gave me a reason to live. When I had nothing, when I wanted to die, you gave me purpose. You three are my purpose, my family, my everything. You've already given me more than I ever dreamed of having. The spring of their senior year, the acceptance letters started arriving. Full scholarships to top universities, all three of them. Laura to MIT for engineering, Kian to Howard University for business, Riley to Columbia for literature. Three brilliant black teenagers who had beaten every odds stacked against them, who had risen from homelessness to academic excellence through love and sacrifice and unshakable determination. On graduation day, Hannah sat in the audience crying openly as her children walked across the stage. She wore her yellow dress, cleaned and pressed, and she didn't care who saw her tears. These were her babies. They'd been abandoned under a bench in a park, starving and hopeless. And now they were high school graduates with full rides to prestigious universities. If that wasn't a miracle, nothing was. After the ceremony, the triplets found Hannah in the crowd. They'd all been crying too. They surrounded her, holding her close. "We'll make you proud, Mama," Laura said. "You already have, babies," Hannah whispered. "You already have." The goodbye when they left for college was bittersweet. Hannah was proud beyond words, but the little room felt impossibly empty without them. For the first time in years, she was alone again, but not lonely, never lonely, because she had purpose that extended beyond her three children. The food stand continued to thrive, and Hannah found herself becoming a beacon for other homeless youth in the neighborhood. Word spread, "If you need help, go see Hannah." She fed hungry kids for free. She gave advice to struggling parents. She became a mother figure to dozens of children who needed to know that someone cared. She employed homeless teenagers at the stand, giving them the same chance Mr. Johnson had given her years ago. She taught them to cook, to work, to believe in themselves. Hannah Mitchell had started as a broken woman on the edge of suicide. She'd become a mother to three abandoned children, and now she was something more, a symbol of what love could do, a living testament to the power of choosing kindness, even when the world had been cruel. Her children called her every Sunday without fail. They sent money home, which she saved for them or used to help other kids. They sent photos of their dorm rooms, their classes, their new lives. And Hannah kept those photos at the food stand, showing them to customers with undisguised pride. "These are my babies," she would say. "They started with nothing, and look at them now." This is what love can do. This is what happens when you don't give up on people. And as she served food to the next generation of forgotten children, Hannah understood that her life had meaning far beyond what she'd imagined in those dark days after Marcus died. She had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. She had taken her grief and turned it into love. She had taken three abandoned children and shown them they were worthy of everything. Gloria had been wrong. Hannah wasn't worthless. She was priceless. Not because of what she had, but because of what she gave. Because of who she loved. Because of the family she'd chosen and the life she'd built from absolutely nothing. She was exactly what she needed to be: a mother, a survivor, a woman who proved that one person's choice to love could change everything. Present day, a regular Friday afternoon in the neighborhood that had become Hannah's home. The brownstones stood tall and familiar, trees lining the streets in full summer bloom. Cars were parked along the curbs. People walked by with shopping bags and briefcases, heading home from work or running errands. It was an ordinary day, the kind Hannah had lived thousands of times before. She was 53 now, her hair graying at the temples, silver threading through the black. Her face was lined with wrinkles earned through years of laughter and tears and survival. But she was beautiful still, with eyes that held both pain and incredible strength, with a smile that could light up the whole block. She wore her signature yellow floral dress, the one she'd bought herself 5 years ago, when things finally got better, when she could afford to replace the threadbare one she'd worn for so long. It was bright and cheerful, matching her spirit, and everyone in the neighborhood knew Hannah by that yellow dress. Her food stand had evolved over the years. No longer just a cart, it was now a permanent fixture with a proper awning, a grill, storage space, and seating for customers who wanted to eat right there on the street. "Hannah's Stand," the sign read, and everyone knew it. It had become an institution in the neighborhood, a place where people came not just for food, but for connection, for kindness, for a reminder that humanity still existed. Hannah stood behind her grill, spatula in hand, cooking with the same love and care she always had. The smell of fried chicken, mac and cheese, and collard greens filled the air. Customers lined up, some regulars she'd been serving for years, others new faces drawn by the reputation of her food and her heart. "There you go, Mr. Davis," she said, handing an elderly man a plate piled high with food. "Extra cornbread, just like you like it." "You're too good to me, Hannah," he said with a smile. A young mother approached next, a toddler on her hip, counting coins in her palm with a worried expression. Hannah saw the calculation happening, saw the moment the woman realized she didn't have quite enough. "Don't worry about it, baby," Hannah said, already preparing a plate. "You take this home to your family. Pay me next time." "Thank you, Miss Hannah. I don't know what we'd do without you. We all help each other. That's how it's supposed to be." This was Hannah's reputation now, the woman with the biggest heart, the woman who never let anyone leave hungry, the woman who had built a community around her food stand, one plate at a time, one act of kindness at a time. She was chatting with Mrs. Davis, the same woman who had helped her all those years ago when she'd first found the children, now elderly and moving slowly, but still a fixture in the neighborhood. They were laughing about something when Hannah heard it, the sound of engines. Not regular car engines, but something deeper, more powerful. A rumble that was unmistakable even before the vehicles came into view. Three exotic cars turned onto the street, moving slowly, deliberately. A white Lamborghini Huracan that gleamed like fresh snow. A red Lamborghini Aventador that blazed like fire. A lime green Lamborghini Urus that stood out like emerald lightning against the urban backdrop. The neighborhood froze. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Conversations died mid-sentence. People turned to stare. Traffic slowed to a crawl as drivers craned their necks to see. Someone pulled out their phone to record. "What in the world?" Mrs. Davis breathed. Hannah looked up from her grill, confusion on her face. Lamborghinis didn't come to this neighborhood. Luxury cars like that belonged in different parts of the city, in neighborhoods with different zip codes, different demographics, different dreams. What were they doing here? The three vehicles pulled up directly in front of her stand, parking in a perfect line that created a stunning visual contrast. Luxury supercars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars parked next to a humble food stand where plates cost $10. The juxtaposition was striking, almost surreal. Hannah stood frozen, spatula still in her hand, eyes wide. A crowd began to gather immediately. People stopped walking. Customers abandoned their spots in line. Everyone wanted to see what was happening, who would step out of those impossible cars. The doors opened simultaneously, like it had been choreographed. And three people emerged, so elegant and powerful and transformed that for a moment, Hannah didn't recognize them. From the white Lamborghini stepped a stunning black woman in a red evening gown. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo, her makeup flawless. She wore heels and jewelry that caught the sunlight, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had conquered the world. But there was something in her eyes, something familiar. From the red Lamborghini emerged a sharp black man in a black suit with burgundy accents, a pocket square and bow tie that spoke of wealth and taste. His presence was commanding, the kind that made people instinctively straighten their spines. But his face, something about his face. From the lime green Lamborghini came another sophisticated black man in a blue suit, his demeanor thoughtful and composed. He stood slightly behind the others, observing, just like Hannah's spatula clattered to the ground. They looked familiar, but so different. Successful, powerful, transformed beyond anything she could have imagined. But those eyes, those faces beneath the polish and success, she knew them. She knew them. The woman in the red dress approached first, taking slow steps, her heels clicking on the pavement. The entire neighborhood watched in silence. When she was close enough to touch, she stopped and spoke one word. "Mama?" Recognition hit Hannah like lightning, like thunder, like an earthquake that shook her entire world. "Laura?" Her hands flew to her mouth, the iconic gesture of shock she'd made so many times in her life, but never quite like this. Tears sprang to her eyes instantly. The two men stepped forward together. "It's us, Mama," they said in unison. "Kian? Riley? Oh my God!" Hannah's voice broke on the last word. Her legs nearly gave out. She swayed and her children rushed forward to catch her, to hold her, to keep her standing when the shock threatened to bring her down. The neighborhood crowd pressed closer, everyone watching, everyone witnessing this moment. Some knew Hannah's story, many didn't, but everyone could see that something extraordinary was happening. Tears streamed down Hannah's face as she looked at them, really looked at them. "Look at you! Look at all of you!" She couldn't stop saying it, couldn't stop touching their faces, making sure they were real. The triplets held her, all of them crying now. 25 years of love and sacrifice and separation colliding in this single moment on a street corner in the neighborhood where Hannah had rebuilt her life. "We told you we'd come back," Laura said, her voice thick with emotion. "We told you we'd repay you. Everything we have, everything we are is because of you," Kian added, his usual composure cracking. Riley, always the quiet one, said simply, "You saved us, Mama. Now it's our turn to save you." Hannah couldn't speak through her tears. She could only hold them, these babies she'd found starving under a bench, these children she'd raised through poverty and struggle, these adults who had become more than she'd ever dreamed possible. The story emerged in pieces, told between embraces and tears, with the whole neighborhood listening. College degrees, then master's degrees. Laura had founded a tech company specializing in AI solutions for urban development, using technology to solve the problems of neighborhoods like the one where she'd grown up. Kian had become a real estate mogul, but not the kind that gentrified and displaced. He built affordable housing developments, created homes for families like his had been. Riley had founded an investment firm that funded minority-owned businesses, giving other people the chances that had been given to them. They'd stayed in touch with Hannah over the years, calling every week, visiting when they could. But they'd been working toward this moment, planning it, building their success so they could do this right. "We wanted to give you everything, Mama," Laura said. "Everything you deserved." "But you already did," Hannah protested. "You already gave me everything by being who you are." Kian smiled and pulled out keys. Not car keys, building keys. He gestured down the street to a renovated building Hannah had noticed being fixed up over the past year, but hadn't paid much attention to. "Mama, we bought you something." Hannah's eyes followed his gesture to the building. A sign was being unveiled at that very moment, clearly timed to this reunion. "Hannah's Kitchen, where everyone is family." "That's your new restaurant," Laura explained. "Five-star establishment, state-of-the-art kitchen, your name on the sign, your dream come true. And upstairs," Riley added, pulling out more keys, "is your apartment, fully furnished, your new home. No more renting, it's yours." Hannah couldn't breathe. "I can't. This is too much. I don't—" "Mama," Laura said firmly, taking her mother's weathered hands in her manicured ones. "You gave us everything when you had nothing. You fed us when you were starving. You housed us when you were homeless. You loved us when the world had thrown us away. This is nothing compared to what you deserve. This is just the beginning of paying back a debt we can never fully repay." The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, tears from people who'd watched Hannah serve and sacrifice for years. Neighbors celebrating someone who'd given so much, finally receiving something back. "Hannah deserves this," someone shouted. Mrs. Davis was crying openly. "Thank you, Jesus, thank you." Hannah was overwhelmed, shaking, unable to process the magnitude of what was happening. 25 years of struggle, of sacrifice, of choosing love over bitterness, and now this impossible, beautiful moment. They walked her to the restaurant, the crowd following like a parade. The interior was stunning. Professional kitchen with top-of-the-line equipment, elegant dining room with warm lighting and beautiful decor. Everything designed to serve the community Hannah loved while providing the quality and dignity every person deserved. But as they showed her around, Hannah stopped. She looked at her children with an expression they remembered from childhood, the one that meant she was about to lay down a rule that wasn't negotiable. "I'll accept this," she said, "but only if we keep the mission. I want to employ people who need a chance. I want to feed anyone who's hungry, whether they can pay or not. I want this place to be what I've always tried to be, a place where everyone matters, everyone is family. The triplets smiled at each other. We wouldn't have it any other way, they said together. It's already built into the business model, Mama. This restaurant will be profitable and serve the community, just like you taught us. Hannah's Kitchen opened 2 weeks later. Lines stretched around the block. The triplets worked alongside their mother that first day, all of them in aprons, serving food the way Hannah had taught them years ago. They hired formerly homeless individuals, gave them training and dignity and purpose. They fed anyone who came through the doors, regardless of ability to pay. The restaurant became an instant institution, exactly what Hannah had always dreamed of creating. Years passed, and Hannah's Kitchen thrived. Hannah trained young chefs, mentored youth, became a grandmother figure to hundreds. The triplets visited constantly. Sunday dinners became sacred family traditions where everyone gathered around Hannah's table. Laura brought her fiancé. Mama, I want you to meet. Keon brought his children, Hannah's grandchildren, who called her grandma and climbed into her lap to hear stories. Riley brought his wife with glowing news. We're expecting, Mama. Hannah's life became full in ways she'd never imagined. The restaurant employed dozens, fed hundreds. There was a waiting list for tables because everyone wanted to experience Hannah's love through her food. One evening, Hannah's grandchildren sat with her, asking questions the way curious children do. Grandma, is it true you found Mommy and Uncle Keon and Uncle Riley in a park? Hannah smiled, her wrinkled face beautiful with joy. I didn't find them, baby. They found me. They saved my life just as much as I saved theirs. Maybe more. On the anniversary of the restaurant's opening, the community threw a celebration to honor Hannah's legacy. Thousands attended. Former customers, current employees, people she'd helped over the years, people who'd heard her story and been changed by it. The triplets gave speeches that left everyone in tears. Laura stood tall and confident. This woman taught us that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, by sacrifice, by showing up every single day. She chose us when she had nothing. She gave us everything when she had less than nothing. That's the definition of a mother. Keon's voice was strong. She taught us that success means nothing if you don't use it to help others. Every business I build, every home I create, I do it asking, what would Mama do? She's the standard I'll never fully meet but will always strive toward. Riley, thoughtful as always. She taught us that one person's kindness can change the world. Every life I touch through my work, every business I fund, every opportunity I create, it all traces back to one woman who stopped in a park and chose to love 3 abandoned children. That's the ripple effect of kindness. Hannah stood to speak, and the crowd went silent. She wore her yellow floral dress, the same style she'd worn for decades, though now she could afford 100 dresses if she wanted. But this was her signature, her symbol. My life wasn't what I planned, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion. I lost everything I thought I wanted. My husband, my baby, my home, everything. I was so broken I wanted to die. But I gained everything I never knew I needed. I gained 3 children who taught me that love transcends blood. I gained purpose when I thought I had none. I gained a family, a community, a life that matters. She paused, looking at Laura, Keon, and Riley. Marcus would be proud, not of what I have, but of who I became. And my babies gave me a reason to live. Look at what we built together. Look at what choosing love over bitterness can create. The final scene was captured by dozens of phones, shared across social media, seen by millions. Hannah standing in front of her restaurant, the 3 Lamborghinis parked outside like symbols of success. Laura, Keon, and Riley on either side of her, symbols of love. Customers streaming in through the doors, symbols of community. And Hannah in her yellow dress, forever and always a symbol of hope. One person's kindness can change the world. One choice to love can break every curse. One woman with nothing became everything. The triplets embraced their mother, holding her close. We love you, Mama. I love you too, babies. You're my greatest blessing. And in that moment, Hannah Mitchell understood that her life hadn't been a tragedy, even though it had contained tragedy. Her life had been a transformation, a journey from darkness to light, a testament to the power of choosing kindness when the world chose cruelty, a legacy of love that would ripple through generations. She had started with nothing. She had ended with everything that mattered. Now I want to ask you something. I want you to really think about this. What would you have done in Hannah's situation? If your husband had died, if you'd lost your baby, if everyone in your community had turned their backs on you, would you have given up? Would you have become bitter? Or would you have found the strength to keep going? And what about those children? If you'd seen Laura, Kian, and Riley huddled under that bench, starving and terrified, would you have stopped? Would you have helped them even when you had nothing yourself? Would you have chosen to love when the world was showing you nothing but cruelty? Think about that. Sit with that question for a moment, because Hannah's story isn't just about one woman and three children. Hannah's story is about all of us. It's about choosing kindness when the world is cruel. It's about being the person someone else needs, even when you're broken yourself. It's about understanding that love, real love, the kind that doesn't demand anything in return, is the most powerful force in the world. Before you go, I need you to do something. First, subscribe to Virtuous Stories and turn on that notification bell. We have over 100 stories like this waiting for you. Stories of triumph, stories of heartbreak, stories of transformation that will remind you what human beings are capable of when they choose love over hate. Second, give this video a like. It takes 1 second and it helps others find Hannah's story. Share it with someone who needs hope today, someone who's struggling, someone who's forgotten that kindness still exists. Third, comment your country down below. Tell me if Hannah's story inspired you. Tell me what it made you feel. I want to know who's hearing this story with me. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Here's what I want you to understand. You might be someone's Hannah. Right now in your life, there might be someone who needs you to show up. Someone who needs your kindness. Someone who's waiting for one person to see them, to help them, to prove that love still exists. Or you might be someone's Laura, Kian, or Riley. You might be the person who's struggling, who feels forgotten, who's waiting for someone to care. And if that's you, I want you to know that your story isn't over. Your Hannah is out there. Don't give up. One kind act can change everything. One choice to help instead of walk away. One decision to love instead of judge. That's all it takes to start a ripple effect that changes generations. So I'm asking you, what will your legacy be? Who will you help today? How will you choose to love? Your choice to be kind can change everything. One person can make a difference. Hannah proved that. 3 Lamborghini pulling up to a food stand proved that. A family built from nothing but love proved that. Be that person. Be the one who chooses kindness. Be the one who shows up. Be the one who loves even when it's hard. Thank you for hearing Hannah's story. Thank you for staying with me from that first moment when 3 luxury cars pulled up to a humble food stand until now. Thank you for believing in kindness, for believing in love, for believing that one person's choice can change the world. Hannah's story is over, but your story is just beginning. What will you do with it? How will you choose to live? Will you choose kindness? Will you choose compassion? Will you choose to be the person that Hannah was? Now go out and create your own story of transformation. The world is waiting. Always remember, at Virtuous Stories, we love you.